welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and delighted to have back in the studio with us today John Mittendorf, kind of our local researcher, apologist, and does all the stuff I don't want to do guy. No, I just don't have the time to do it. But anyway, we've been on an incredible series, Where is America in Biblical Prophecy and Future Global Events? And John, this has been a fascinating topic and discussion. And I want to say to our viewers and listeners, the notes now have grown to about 28, 29 pages. And we're making all of these available to you. And the best place you can go is to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. And John will send you the file of these notes. And it's possible there still will be some more added to it. But anyway, it is a fascinating discussion, especially with the news these days. So give our listeners and viewers quickly a recap that brings us up to the whole energy topic.
Well, just a quick recap, Perry. First of all, we talked about is America mentioned in Bible prophecy, and it is not specifically. I mean, you can do some stretching here and there, but not really. But then I said, why don't we also take a look at how is America doing from a secular perspective in history, because people tend to think, well, we're the strongest nation on earth, we're the superpower in the world today, and all that's true. Then when you look at history, which says the average age for a civilization is 200, 250 years maybe, we're past that now, then how are we doing? And I think if you look at recent political events, and you look at recent political events in Oregon, what have you, there's a lot of change in the air. But also, I think a lot of people are becoming concerned with what was not acceptable maybe 30, 40 years ago has become more mainstream today. And so they say, well, America, to a large degree, is weakening from the inside, not from the outside. And I think a lot of people agree with that. So I said, why don't we take a look at then America from a secular viewpoint. And the last program, we talked about abortion and murder. We talked about the open rejection of God. First chapter of Romans, what does it say about that? And it talks about 5 steps that when you have a nation that openly rejects God, you can expect to see 5 things. And we talked about that, and that's the first chapter of Romans. So then I said, why don't we also take a look at energy, oil, natural gas, coal, and then debt, and then last but not least, the rapture.
Okay.
And you know what's fascinating about the rapture, and I'm getting ahead of myself just for a minute, is the Barna Group, which is a very respected group as far as doing a lot of looking at various things in the country, estimates there is about 10% Christians in our civilization in America. And so when you talk about 300 Americans, 10%, that's 30 million. And if you think about taking 30 million people out of this country instantaneously, is going to have a huge effect on this country. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But I want to go back to energy just for a minute, because as I prepared this study, I was amazed at what I found in the field of energy. And I want to start off with just a little story and something you probably remember. If you go back to 1973, you'll remember at the end of the 1973 war, which Israel won, that Saudi Arabia, OPEC decided to put the squeeze on America and the Netherlands because we supported Israel. And that's when you had the oil embargo. And you probably remember the long lines in the gas stations, the odd even days, you know, when you could go to the gas station, you couldn't go to the gas station. But out of that, Saudi Arabia, who's very, very good with the dollar, money, took a hit financially because they weren't selling oil. And they've never forgotten that. So if we then fast forward up to today, from 1973, it's interesting that right after the oil embargo, President Nixon said, and maybe you remember this, we will be energy dependent in 10 years. How have we done?
Not so good at that, but we proved we could do it, but we're not doing it.
Yeah. In 1973, we were importing 35% of our oil. 2005, it was over 60%, so we doubled. So we're going to talk about some presidents this morning, but I want to mention the fact that all the presidents since President Nixon have not really done anything to enhance our ability to be energy independent. All of them. All of them, because we're importing twice the oil today as we were back in 1973. So it's not really a political look, it's more of a factual look. And so I want to start you off with this question this morning. Why has gas, and the question, I'm going to then turn it around to a potential prophetic link. Okay?
I'll try to. All right.
Okay. Why is the gas at the price pump basically gone from over $3 a gallon back in September, October, November to less than $2? Well, right now it's about $2.20. Why is it halved in about 6 months?
Well, primarily because...
And that's a question a lot of people are asking, by the way.
Yeah, primarily because we have started to produce our own oil. I mean, our own reserves. That's part of it.
That's part of it.
We've discovered the fracturing and all of that stuff. We know now that we have the capability of being energy efficient. We haven't turned from that. So what the other guys are doing is lowering the price, so we still say we stay addicted to them and not spend the money to go after our own resources.
Interestingly, you're right, and there's been a very interesting story unfold. And if I go back a little bit, Russia needs over $90 a barrel to make money, to finance their economy. Right. Iran needs over $100 a barrel to finance their economy. Same way with Angola and Venezuela. And so, as you know, every year OPEC has a meeting. And so in November of last year, 2014, there was a meeting, and on one side of the table sat Saudi Arabia, and on the other side of the table sat Russia, Angola, Venezuela, and Iran. And you're right that up until that time that the demand for world oil had somewhat diminished due to increased production, decreased need for it. You're seeing electric cars now. You're seeing more renewable energy sources come online.
And the reserves were full.
And the reserves, and actually they were starting to stockpile oil.
Yeah.
So Russia looks at Saudi Arabia and they said, hey, what do you think about if you cut production, and we'll cut production, that way we can bring the price of oil back up to where it was before, and we can all enjoy huge benefits. Saudi Arabia said, we don't think so. And so they didn't cut their production. As a result, that's why from about November of 2014 till just 1 or 2 months ago, gasoline went from about $3.50 at the pump down to about, well, Costco here just a couple weeks ago, I paid $1.94, $1.95. Out of that has come some very interesting side problems. Russia's economy is nosediving big time. The Russian ruble has taken a huge dive. Venezuela might default, and Iran is also losing money. And Saudi Arabia feels they've stockpiled since 1973, they've stockpiled close to $800 to $900 billion. So they can afford to take a hit. So the next OPEC meeting is June of this year. So we'll see what happens. But the story that I want to come around to, and I said maybe talk about biblical prophecy just for a minute, is that if Russia is in a huge economic nosedive today, which they are, including the Russian ruble, if you go back to Ezekiel 38, verses 4 and 9, it talks about, that's the Gog-Magog war, it talks about how Gog is going to put a hook in the mouth of Russia, turn around, and bring her back down with the Islamic allies on Israel, and that's where God is going to destroy them on the mountains of Israel. And a lot of Bible scholars have wondered for a long time what would cause Russia to march on Israel. And when you look at the world economy today, how fragile it is and how quickly it can change. Just in a couple of months, we went from $3.50 a gallon to $1.94 a gallon, just based on one country's going, I don't think so. That if Russia's economy were continue to fall because they're not making money, you can see where they would look at Israel and they go, wait a minute, you know, Israel has a warm water port. Israel has uncountable resources and riches in the Dead Sea. And also they're starting to discover natural gas and oil in Israel.
Yeah, big time.
Big time. And so that is I'm going to say possible link that would give Russia the impetus. And by the way, Russia hates Israel anyway. There's no doubt about that.
Doesn't Russia have to also have the coalition with the eastern countries just to have oil for itself? I mean, even though it has it, but it is the bargaining chip that keeps them at the table.
Right. Yes.
You know.
Yeah, that is exactly right.
Yeah.
But when you talk about speculative perception, and that's basically what this is speculative perception, when you look at what's happening on the world market today, the energy market, and how fast and how easy it can change just based on one country, it's easy to see how Russia could have the impetus to mark on Israel, which, you know, back in Hal Lindsey, when he wrote Late Great Planet Earth, people are going, well, this is something that's way, way off in the future. No, it's not off in the future. It's sitting on the table today in February.
Yeah. All right, so why is, so you're saying that energy is a factor in biblical prophecy. It is
could be.
Well, it is the natural, well, actually natural resource, but it is that. But it is the thing that brings countries together. I mean,
together. It's also a very economic, powerful tool for a country to blackmail other countries, and we saw that back in 1973 with the oil embargo. So it works both ways. It can be a huge positive, it can be a huge negative.
All right. So it also is a economic power play.
Yes.
The more that America is dependent upon it, they could stall our economy by driving the price through the roof. But wouldn't that be a motivation for us then to go inward ourselves?
Oh, exactly right. In fact, another side view on on what we just talked about is the fact that now the price of oil per barrel today was $52.78.
Yeah, it bumped up.
Just a couple of weeks ago, it was down around $47, $48 a barrel. So you know, it's still half of what it was back last year. Mm-hmm. But another factor that's had on the American oil production, energy production, I should say, is hydraulic fracturing. And hydraulic fracturing, which we'll get into after the break a little bit in more detail, because I think people have heard that name a lot. So what does that really mean? Yeah. That hydraulic fracturing right now is not really economically feasible, and a lot of smaller companies in America are starting to go down because it just isn't feasible to produce oil when it's only $52 a gallon.
Well, there you go. Energy, part of the big picture. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back. And by the way, if you want a copy of these notes, it's pretty simple. You can go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, and John will send you the file. Up to almost 29 pages now of notes and growing. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and John Mittendorf's in the house. We're continuing on with our incredible and fascinating discussion, Where is America in Biblical Prophecy and Future Global Events? Now, this is a series of programs. We've done a lot of programs up to this point. We're talking about the subject of energy, and where is energy, i.e. oil, in Bible prophecy, and what is it? What part does it play in Bible prophecy? Well, it ends up being fairly significant.
Well, you know, Perry, when we talk about Bible prophecy, that basically the world's eyes have been focused for a long time where? The Middle East, and particularly today. But what is the key that gives the Middle East credibility in the world? Yeah. It's oil. Oil. It's oil, really. Yeah. And if you were to take that away, the rest of the country, I mean, Canada, America, Japan, I mean, the list goes on. Without oil, your military doesn't run, your economy doesn't run, a lot of things don't work. So to a large degree, OPEC, the Middle East, is sitting at the table dealing out the cards that they want to deal out. Which brings me to our next point.
Okay.
And right before the break, I mentioned a very interesting phrase called hydraulic fracturing that I think a lot of people have heard but don't really understand. I want to talk about that just for a couple seconds so people really know where America is. And when I say where America is, hydraulic fracturing has been a revolutionary American, not anybody else, American breakthrough. And it was discovered back in about 1947. And basically, hydraulic fracturing has put America in a position to be the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas beginning in 2015. That's this year. It's interesting, America used to be the world's largest oil importer. It's now positioned to be the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas beginning this year. And I want to read this just so I get it correct. America has an estimated recoverable oil shale resource of between 1.7 and 2.6 trillion barrels, depends where you get your figures from, of oil. Now for reference, 1 trillion barrels of oil is nearly 4 times Saudi Arabia's current proven resources. Do you want me to repeat that again?
Well, I think we've heard some of this argument, but you know, it's not registering.
Right.
You know, we have the capability of us being totally energy efficient and dependent upon ourselves, not them.
Yeah, hydraulic fracturing has now given America the potential to reverse a 40-year decline in American crude oil production in about 5 to 6 years and become a world leader. Now, when I say hydraulic fracturing, or fracturing is another term for it, people say, what in the world is that? And it's really pretty simple. What they do is they'll take a wellhead and they drill down vertically and then they drill horizontally. And when they drill horizontally, you have this, this device that they run through the rock strata of the oil shale that has a bunch of holes. It looks like Swiss cheese. And then under extremely high pressure, they inject water, sand, and chemicals. What that does is that takes the rock shale, the oil shale, and it spreads it apart. And once you spread it apart, now the natural gas and the oil is more free to come right up to the surface. But what's interesting about that is that once they take that drilling device and pull it out of the ground, that the chemical makeup of the slurry that they're pumping down there in high pressure tends to keep the rock strata or the oil shale wide open. Which allows then, and I'll read this so I get it correct, after 2 to 5 days of hydraulic fracturing, a well can supply oil or natural gas for 20 to 40 years.
All right, because isn't oil a byproduct of pressure?
Heat and pressure.
Okay.
Yeah, heat and pressure.
Heat and pressure.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So by leaving something in there, you've kept the pressure in place.
Correct. And then when you talk about oil shale or rock strata, because it's very tight, with the older well drilling systems, you would just drill down. What you do is you just drill a hole so big, whatever your drilling device was, well, that was it. Well, now with hydraulic fracturing, you're taking the oil shale and you're spreading it open, so you're taking a larger area to allow the trapped natural gas and oil to come back up the surface.
Right.
That discovery has enabled America, starting this year, to become the world producer in oil and natural gas.
Well, let's see if we allow it.
Well, that's where we're going with this discussion.
Because you said earlier that the price of oil today is so low that companies have to think twice whether or not they want to spend the money now to go after it, because it's cheaper to buy it from OPEC.
From OPEC, correct.
Than it is to go into this fracturing. But capitalism being what it is, and entrepreneurialism being what it is, a smart person would go after this now, knowing that once
we get back into the high price again.
You get back up to $3 a gallon,
right.
You're now a winner.
Right. So Saudi Arabia not only has put the squeeze on Russia, Venezuela, Angola, Iran, they've also put the squeeze on America, because a lot of the smaller companies up in North Dakota, Canada, Texas oil fields, as an example, where your oil shale are, that borrowed a lot of money under high interest rates to develop the oil fields. Now that the price of oil per barrel is down significantly, they're going out of business because they can't afford to do business because they don't have a return on their money. So it'll be interesting to see how much longer Saudi Arabia keeps the prices down. And it will be interesting to see what America does with her natural resource.
But if it takes Russia over $90 a barrel to exist, and Venezuela over $100 a barrel,
Iran's $100, right?
$100 a barrel to exist.
Right. Well,
those numbers aren't there now.
Correct. So they're going downhill.
How long can they survive?
How long can they survive? Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
But it's also interesting that Saudi Arabia detests Iran and Russia. So,
the love.
Yeah, all the information that I read said that Saudi Arabia feels they can take a hit, Russia and Iran can't take the hit.
All right, so oil is very much a part of this discussion, and it comes into big play this year, whether or not we go for it or not. We got a president that doesn't want it. We have the Keystone Pipeline that's now gotten through Congress, sets up the first presidential veto.
Who he will veto.
Which he will veto.
Right.
But the whole issue behind the pipeline was the science, and the science proved to be that it was totally safe to do this.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the major arguments against hydraulic fracturing is, well, if you're pumping water and sand, that's okay, but if you're adding chemicals to it, it's going to get in the water table, it's going to destroy the water table. And so far, there is no known case of that happening, but that is the argument. Okay. Now, that might be possible down the road.
Yeah.
Of course, as technology also advances, they get better and better and better at it, too, see? Yeah. But still.
The other word I heard is that you actually weaken the structure of the earth and you create earthquake zones.
Well, that's for the, yeah.
I'm
so on and so on.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't need to play that down. It's just that at some point, with the fields being as vast as they are, we could be doing this extracting through the fracturing in areas that have no population.
Basically, you're talking about North Dakota up into Canada, and then you're also talking about some of the Permian fields as example in Texas.
And Colorado, I understand, was pretty rich with it.
Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana has oil sands, and what that takes is not hydraulic fracturing, that takes heat. So both the heat to extract oil from oil sands and fracturing to extract oil from rock strata, which is pressure, both of them are expensive, as opposed to just drilling a hole down the ground and watching the oil come up.
Fascinating stuff, John.
Fascinating. Okay, now let's talk about natural gas. We're talking about energy. There's three basic energies. Oil, we talked about that a little bit. The natural gas, which basically is carbon, hydrogen. It comes out of the ground as a gas. We all know that. Compared to oil and coal, natural gas emits about 30 to 45% less carbon dioxide, which is becoming a big deal because of global warming and so on. It's interesting that natural gas uses or heats about 50% of the American homes today. So it is a major source of energy for this country, also for electricity. America is currently the top producer of natural gas in the world today. So we're standing at the threshold of being the top producer for oil. We're currently the top producer of natural gas in the world today, and then we come to coal.
Yeah, but we don't allow the coal trains to go through Oregon.
There we go. America is the Saudi Arabia of coal and has more recoverable coal resources than any other country in the world. Coal is found in 34 states. It's used to generate 50% of electricity in America. And what are we doing with it? Before Obama was elected president in 2008, he stated, "I will put the coal industry out of business." And he's well on his way to doing that. Well on his way to doing that. So let me give you just a quick overview on what I call my energy summary overview. And again, I want to emphasize the fact that since President Nixon's 1973 energy independence promise, have allowed this country to get to the position that we're at today. When I say the position we're at today, is to depend on other countries for our energy resources. And if something happens to that, America's in deep trouble. But we're at the threshold of turning that around. The question is, what are we going to do with it? So in the notes, I have put in the website that you can go to for Obama's Advancing American Energy Program. And I'm just going to quote just a couple things from this because I don't want to read all of this.
Yeah, we've got about 1 minute here.
These trends are increasing our energy security. He's talking about how much they've done. Energy security, cutting our carbon pollution, enhancing our economic growth. The President has taken unprecedented action to build the foundation for a clean energy economy, tackle the issue of climate change, and protect our environment. Is that a true or false statement?
Well, I'd have to say the first 4 lines were false.
That's a false statement, yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And before an upcoming break, let me make this one quote. This comes from the Washington Times. President Obama has gone to war, but not with the Islamic State group, Iran, North Korea, or any foreign threat. Mr. Obama, at the urging of environmental extremists, has declared war on America's oil and natural gas producers. His weapon of choice is a new Environmental Protection Agency regulation.
And the courts.
And the courts.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. If you want these notes, you can go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back, and fascinating topic to say the least. Now, well, listen, we're just in a couple of areas. We have done a lot of talk up to this point of where is America in biblical prophecy and future global events, and you need to get all the notes to get caught up to where we are. But we are talking about a very interesting topic because it's very much in the news, and that is energy and the price of energy and the capability of America becoming energy independent, as we say. We have more than the capability of doing it. And I find it very interesting, John, is if any of those eastern countries turn the oil spigot off on Israel, it could hurt it. But in the meantime, they have discovered some of the largest natural gas reserves in the world in Israel.
In Israel, and usually when you find natural gas, oil isn't far behind.
Well, it's the same process, heat and energy,
pressure.
So it's just a matter of time. So anyway, God's amazing.
Yep.
He's just amazing.
When you say God is amazing, when you look at it from the perspective that we're talking about here, it's amazing that he basically put, up until the recent discovery in America at least, that the basic natural resources that this world runs on, which is oil, he put it where? In the Middle East.
Yeah.
And who did he put in charge of that, right?
Yeah.
So, and here's all the other countries coming to the feeding trough of the Islamic countries.
Ishmael may think he's in charge.
But he's not.
He's not. Yeah. Okay,
so where I wanted to go with the energy thing real quick is just the fact that is America positioned in 2015 at the doorstep of being the world's largest producer of energy, oil, gas, we already coal. Yes, we are. The point is, what are we doing with it? And the interest of environmentalism and global warming, and there are some good aspects to that. But in the interest of that, to the extremist point of view, we're taking our natural energies and we're throttling them and not really using them. So you say, yes, we can be the world's top producer, but if tomorrow, if Saudi Arabia was to do something, Iran was to do something, close the Straits of Hormuz as an example, and shut off the supply of oil, could we really then start using our supply of oil from Canada, from North Dakota and Texas? The answer is no, we're not set up to do it.
Well, plus we don't have the refineries.
Plus we don't have the refineries, is exactly right. So from the position of energy, you can see where America is in a tenuous position if we don't develop what we have, which we haven't since 1973. We're going to be energy independent in 10 years, right? Right.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the national debt. And I think if there's one thing that people should be concerned about as far as an Achilles heel for America, it's the national debt. And when I thought about the national debt, I thought, well, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but three things I want to talk about briefly is the welfare state, the overall national debt, which is not $18 trillion.
No, that's just the published one.
That's just the published one. You've been reading these notes, I can tell.
No. I've been a student of this stuff for a while. Yeah.
And the American dollar.
Yeah.
Just as a highlight, what's happening to the American dollar?
Well, it's plummeting in value.
It's plummeting in value, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but China is currently buying up all the gold that they can get their hands on.
Yeah, physical gold.
Physical gold, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And what they want to do is they want to reset the price of gold globally. And if they can do that, they will put a serious crunch on America.
Okay, we approach this with a little bit of fear and trembling because I'm getting a lot of stuff forwarded to me that the crash of the dollar could be as early as September 15th of this year.
Right. And one of the things that I was dismayed about is that when you research this and you read a lot of information, there's a lot of people saying, well, it could come in 2033. That's when Social Security is supposed to go insolvent. It's 2033. They could say, no, it could happen this year. I mean, you see all of these people, and they're great economists from J.P. Morgan, Bloomberg, and I mean, the list just goes on. But the point is that God is the foundation and the rock of our faith in this country. And so whether it happens tomorrow, whether it happens 20 years from now, whether it happens 30 years from now, it doesn't really make any difference, because if we're looking up instead of horizontal, it shouldn't be a major factor in our life. Is God pulling the strings in America and globally in the world? Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And I've never seen his seed begging for bread.
Exactly right.
So if your trust is in him.
If you trust in him,
yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So, national debt. Let's talk about the welfare state first. And I think this is one that should concern a lot of people. And basically what you're talking about is social programs. And that started back under President Johnson, 1965, 1966. And it's interesting that since that time that we have spent roughly $1 trillion per year on welfare programs. Mm-hmm. So you say, okay, so what have we gotten from that? According to the U.S. Bureau of Census, virtually nothing. Yeah,
more dependency.
More dependency, exactly right.
Yeah.
Adjusted for inflation, this spending, when you talk about this spending, which is $22 trillion, which welfare has cost the American taxpayers, is 3 times the cost of all American military wars since the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. And growing, and growing. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the war against poverty has been minimal. In other words, we've lost $22 trillion, but we really have nothing to show for it. Mm-hmm. And in the notes, I just put down some figures. I'm not going to read them all. More than 1 out of 3 of every Americans live in households that are now on welfare. Half of all children born today will be on food stamps at some point in their life. 49% of Americans are receiving 49% of Americans are receiving benefits from at least one government program every single month. Now, you can keep going over all the facts and the figures. The major problem with that is the foundational approach is, as we continue to increase the number of Americans who are on welfare, we're doing 2 major detrimental things to this country. Number one, the majority of the population, which now is 49–50% and increasing, are becoming more and more dependent on the government. Mm-hmm. Secondly, you're also reducing the wealth of the country, because if I'm not out earning money and if I'm taking money from the government, mm-hmm. I'm not putting money back into the government.
Well, the bottom line is this, and nobody wants to talk about it anymore or at all, and that is that our current spending rate, our current budget, is unsustainable.
Correct.
We are actually consistently spending more money than we're taking in and borrowing money to pay the difference. And even President Obama's current budget proposal showed that we were to reach out and borrow some more money. So we've maxed the credit card out. We can't make the minimum payment, so we take out another credit card to make the minimum payment on this credit card while we're maximing that credit card out. I mean, that's kind of the word picture that we're doing. But I don't think anybody, it is such a negative, nobody wants to deal with it. It is such a looming reality over the top of us that we don't want to touch the subject. But the bottom line is, if you as a person spend $100 more a month than you take in, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, before you crash.
You crash.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
A healthy, strong economy cannot rest on a consistent decline of people who produce the foundation of this nation's wealth. From another perspective, America's wealth is steadily being decreased because of welfare.
You know the irony of this, John, excuse me for just interjecting this, and I'm no economist, so forgive me for my limited knowledge, but I did see some figures that if we made a flat 10% cut of the government across the board,
that would take care of the debt problem.
We
wipe it out.
We take care of this problem in 2 years.
But that's
There's so much cash flow in America,
Right.
and the income. In fact, the highest revenues into the government has been the highest. All right. All you got to do is cut expenses 10% across the board, like you and I would do in our household. And yeah, you're going to, say, well, you're going to create unemployment. No, just take the numbers. Forget people for a moment. And I know that sounds pretty cold, but just take the numbers and look at it.
Right.
You solve the problem. That's how much cash flows in America.
Right.
But we're not willing to do that.
We're not willing to do that, right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Here's another interesting fact. In 1963, entitlement transfers were less than $1 out of every 15. By 2012, they were more than $1 out of every 6 and growing. So you can see basically where the economy is going.
Scary.
Scary. Let's talk about debt. America has the largest debt burden in the world, which is about $18 trillion. And basically, as you know, and I think the people that are watching and listening know also, it's a result of a government that spends more than it collects. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. This is not rocket science.
Yeah.
And so the major problem, well, maybe not the major problem, yeah, it is a major problem, Perry, is that we hear 18 trillion, 20 trillion, 5 trillion, 10 trillion. It becomes mundane after a while. It has no meaning to it. It says, oh, well, it's just another $18 trillion.
We're creating a trillion. We're treating a trillion like it's a nickel.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And if you go back in history, let's go back to 1971 just for a minute. And that was a decision by President Nixon to detach the American dollar from the gold standard, and that was called the Nixon shock. And I don't know if you remember that or not. And then he promised, well, we're going to make some modifications, and I'll be back, and we'll fix it. And they never did. And so to this day, the system that we have today is a de facto system that's based on a freely floating fiat currency that remains in place since 1971.
With no value.
Well, what that means is the amount of money that is printed is no longer limited, and it's not linked to gold. They took it away from gold. So if the government needs more money, what do?
They just print it.
They print more money. That's exactly right. So in the past 6-8 years, they've printed an additional $4 trillion with nothing to back it up. So you can see what's happening really to the cost of the American dollar.
I have a question. I got to take a break here, but I have a question. If we defaulted, what happens? I mean, do we give them California? What do we do?
Well, give them California would be a start, right?
Well, I don't mean to be flippant there, but I mean, what do you do? I mean, if we defaulted to our debtors, China,
right,
primarily,
and Russia is buying a lot of Treasury bills also.
So,
yeah,
what do they come to get? All the Fords?
A broke country.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
All right, it's 14 minutes away from the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. John Mittendorf's with us. If you want these notes, and they are very comprehensive, very well thought out, let me encourage you to send John an email at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, and he'll send you the file back, absolutely free. And when you contact him, please let us know where you're listening or watching the Dove. We'd like to know that as well. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to try to wrap this up. We may not get there.
Well, we're trying.
We're trying. We're dealing with an incredible topic, and it's called Where America Is in Biblical Prophecy and Future Global Events. And all of these notes, John has done an outstanding job in putting this together. And thank you, John, for the hours and hours of work and research to do this. And you can go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com and send John an email, and he will send you back the file with all these notes in it. hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, and please let us know where you're listening and watching. All right, part of the national debt, what we're seeing on the news is 18 trillion. By the way, that's more than doubled under the Obama administration. But what we're not talking about is unfunded mandates that are there that have to be paid, Social Security being one of them. You add that to the national debt, and we are so far under that You can't even imagine.
You can't comprehend it. Let me go back and cover just one point. That since we took the dollar and separated it from gold, what that did was that allowed the government to be able to overspend as long as the national debt limit was not exceeded. And so it seems like every year you hear Congress, we have this debt limit problem, and so how do they solve it?
Yeah.
They raise the debt limit, right? So if I raise the debt limit, now I can overspend again up until I hit the debt limit. When I hit the debt limit, what do? I raise that. I just year after year after year after year. Yeah. So that's where that comes from.
So
now,
shutting the government down, is emotional as all as it is, you know, every time we shut the government down, nothing happened.
Nothing happens is exactly right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No catastrophic event happened.
Right. But they make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Make a deal. Okay, now, we've talked about the national debt is $18 trillion, but there's also another national debt that's not really talked about or reported, and that's the true national debt, which is $18 trillion plus 86.8, or let's just say $87 trillion of unfunded liability.
Okay, now, there's three things that make this up. You got Social Security, Medicare, and the federal employees' future retirement benefits,
right.
PERS.
Yeah.
We call it PERS in Oregon.
Exactly right.
You add those three together, we owe $86.8 trillion on top of the $18 trillion.
Is that something that we can get out from underneath?
Not unless we make a drastic change.
Not unless we make a drastic change is exactly right. Now, what pathway are we going down currently?
Well, the other way.
The other way. We're going down the wrong pathway is exactly right. So I think that then takes us, Perry, then up to the American dollar. And as we've talked about, back in 1944, the United States signed what's called the Bretton Woods Agreement that specified the conditions for the United States to exchange U.S. dollars for gold. However, 1971, what President Nixon do?
He
separated the two. And then if you need more money, not a problem, we just print more money. So in the last 6 to 8 years, we needed more money, so we printed $4 trillion more dollars out of thin air. It's just paper. And so I'm not going to read a lot of the quotes that I have in here from J.P. Morgan. It talks about what the long-range prospect for that is. But the bottom line is that China has formed a new enterprise called the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And I'm quoting from J.P. Morgan on this one. And the headline is, China will use gold and gold pricing to force global currency reset.
Yeah, so if they can put the world back on the gold standard.
Right.
They're king of the mountain.
They're king of the mountain. The yuan, Y-U-A-N-G, is now the type of money that is the now international standard.
Question. Never can be answered.
Okay. How
much gold really is in Fort Knox? We don't know.
You don't know. You don't know. And nobody knows how much gold China has. There's estimates. There's estimates. Let me read this first sentence from J.P. Morgan. One of the purposes behind China's creation of the new Shanghai Gold Exchange is to eventually take over global price controls of the monetary metal away from the COMEX. That's us. It's a division of the New York Mercantile Exchange, and then force a global currency reset by raising the price of gold to its actual value. Today it's not. This will have a devastating effect on derivatives and ongoing use of the COMEX futures market to suppress gold prices and protect the dollar, which they're currently doing. This will also cause a massive chaos in the fiat currency markets. That's America. Mm-hmm. That's America. So Russia, actually it's Russia and China, but China is basically the ringleader, is basically trying to collect enough gold to be able to force the world monetary markets to dump the dollar and take over the yuan as the global currency.
There's a lot of supporting research footnotes in these notes for you to have that underscores what he's saying. So again, go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. All right, the rapture. John's going to tell us when it's going to happen.
I'm not going to tell you when it's going to happen. I'm going to tell you it is going to happen.
Oh, John, I thought you were going to set the date.
If I do that, we're in deep trouble, right?
You're out the door.
We're out the door is exactly right. But I think one of the things that when you think about the tribulation, immediately you say, well, is it pre-trib, is it mid-trib, is it post-trib? And I'm just going to say that probably the most popular viewpoint today is pre-trib. In other words, Christ is going to come back for his church prior to the tribulation.
Yeah.
If that were to happen, what would happen to America? And all the information that you can gather and read on that, basically all the scholars say exactly the same thing. America defaults on instantaneously. Because of, can you imagine, and we mentioned this right when we started the program this morning, that the Barna Group estimates, and this is a conservative figure, of about 10% of the current American population. Of over 300 million people, we find at least 30 million Americans will suddenly disappear. It's probably more than that.
So the tithe of humanity.
Yeah. So here's a perspective on that. To put this into perspective, 30 million people is twice the combined population of LA, New York, Houston, Chicago. Suddenly gone. What does that do to the infrastructure, the military, the stock market, the American economy, the world economy, etc., etc., etc.? But not only have you done that, you've also, as found in Matthew 5, 13, and 14, taken the light and the salt out of this earth.
All right. Well, it's utter chaos and it's decadence at its highest. But let me ask you this. I find this very interesting. We talk about the rapture of this, all these people are gone, and the world just kind of goes on as if that never really happened.
No. Well, the world will go on, but the world will go on in a very chaotic condition. What happened, and then how do you replace 30 million people in this country in all walks of life?
Yeah, but the whole reason they're gone evaporates into world problems. This was the major spiritual event of humanity, and the world just kind of hiccups and keeps going?
That's a possibility, because who now is running the show on earth?
Man.
And,
well, so to speak.
And Satan.
Yeah.
Satan. When you take God's hand off of this planet, you take the light and the salt, you remove the Holy Spirit, be a better way to say it, I think. Remove the Holy Spirit from earth. Who now is running the show on earth? Is basically Satan.
Well, boy, this opens up a can of worms. But, I think what you've done here in a very excellent way, you've capsulated it. And folks, look, these notes are worth having. Just go to his People Rejoice at gmail.com. John will send you the file. For those of you that don't have computers, you can contact us here at the Dove. We'll be glad to print you off a copy. It's very, very comprehensive, by the way. And John, this has been fascinating.
Well, you know what, it's fun to do, and I think probably one of the most interesting parts of this study, for me, was the investigation, the study into oil, and where America is positioned today as far as being a world leader. And we tend to think, well, OPEC sits at the table and deals the cards out. Not now. Well, let me put it this way. America is at the threshold of replacing the Middle East as far as energy is concerned. The question is, what are we going to do with it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where are we going next? What's the Lord telling you?
Well, believe it or not, we finished today.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't think we would.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to do a little bit of thinking for the next program. So.
Well, I know you and I have talked about several topics.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating, and I think that here's the one thing that I want to come against, and that's the fatalistic attitude of Christians, that all of this is, oh well, this is God orchestrating his return, the second coming, so why stick your nose in the middle of it, why push back? And I get that argument to a certain degree. I don't accept it, but if that results in you doing nothing for the kingdom, I think you're in dangerous territory.
Right.
We should be evangelizing like crazy.
Evangelizing. Mm-hmm.
We should be pulling out all the stops and winning people to Christ.
Exactly right. And I think also we can say, that the world could end tomorrow. It could end 1,000 years now. We have no idea.
We have no
idea. So,
all this stuff could play out for a lot more time than
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. I have my own little theory on it, because I'm still got in the back of my mind the Great Harvest, and maybe we can talk about that.
Okay, the Great Harvest.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right, thanks. His People Rejoice at gmail.com. Go there and ask John to send you the file, and then please tell us where you're listening and watching. Okay, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.